I'd argue that mosquitoes are the most annoying pest in existence. Not only are the red, itchy welts they leave annoying, but mosquitoes cause diseases that kill over 1 million people every year. There's a similar number of people that die in car accidents every year. Hi, welcome back to DIY Biotech. Today we're discussing GM mosquitoes and their effects on the environment in the Florida Keys. Dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and even yellow fever. All of these diseases are transmitted by mosquitoes. Dengue causes fever-like symptoms which result in the death of about 4% of sick, infected individuals. Zika, when transmitted to pregnant women, has a chance to cause severe birth defects. And, if you think you're safe from these diseases because you live in the United States, did you know there was an outbreak of Zika in 2009 and dengue in 2016? There are no effective cures for these diseases, and even the effects of pesticides are beginning to lack as mosquitoes gain resistance. Additionally, the species that causes the majority of these infections, Aedes aegypti, is not even native to the Americas. For these reasons, new and old solutions have been used for decades in an attempt to control the populations of these pests. Since mosquitoes lay eggs and undergo a larval phase in the water, reduction of standing water in an area can reduce mosquito populations. During the Zika and dengue outbreaks in the United States, there were several public awareness campaigns that were started to encourage the public to dump out standing water. This may slightly aid the problem, but the typical climate that mosquitoes inhabit already has multiple sources of standing water like marshes, ditches, and wetlands. It's simply uneconomical and impractical to drain all of these sources or to introduce something like predatory fish. Another technique that has some traction is called the sterile insect technique, or SIT, not to be confused with another arrangement of these letters. This method relies on releasing large amounts of healthy but reproductively sterile mosquitoes, which reduces the sexual success rate of the entire population. The idea is that wild female mosquitoes will be distracted mating with partners that won't yield any offspring. SIT can be achieved by sterilizing males with radiation or genetic modifications. However, the main disadvantage of this technique is that millions of sterile mosquitoes need to be bred and then released into the wild. Finally, of course, there's pesticides. DDT is probably the most well-known and controversial of mosquito control techniques. While incredibly effective, this compound has negative environmental effects such as eggshell thinning in birds like the bald eagle. DDT is an effective adulticide, meaning it kills the adult insects in a population. The next most recognizable name in the space is DEET. DEET, as opposed to DDT, is an insect repellent and, based on current literature, is non-toxic to humans and safe for the environment when used as directed. There are several other control methods on the market, but let's move on to the most exciting one. Biotech, a UK-based company, has been developing self-limiting insects for the past 2 decades. Their recent endeavors into mosquito control are incredibly promising for reducing populations of this deadly disease vector. Tests have already been performed in Brazil, Panama, the Cayman Islands, Malaysia, but just this year, April 2021, their GM mosquitoes were released in the Florida Keys. Unfortunately, Tropical Storm Fred paused some of these experiments temporarily in August, and more data may not be released until later this year. We've already arrived in a timeline where GM mosquitoes are being released into our environment, but I want to provide as clear and precise information about how this technology works so that you can make an informed decision on the topic. Fear and hesitancy is honestly a good first instinct for projects like this, as humans tend to follow an unfortunate trend of thinking we know how everything works. See DDT mentioned previously, the release of cats to control mice populations in Hawaii, and I think I'm forgetting one. Climate change. Biotech's GM mosquitoes carry 2 transgenes, meaning genes not naturally occurring in the species. The first is pretty simple. It's a gene called DSRED2, a well-studied gene that encodes for a protein that fluoresces and thus allows researchers to identify which larvae are GM. The second gene is called TTAV. On a high level, this gene encodes for a protein that increases how much of that protein is being made. This leads to a positive feedback loop of more and more and more of this protein being made, which effectively steals resources from the rest of the organism's functions, leading to death. The TTAV activator protein that the TTAV gene codes for is conjugated to a DNA activation domain called VP16. TTAV activator protein binds upstream of the TTAV gene, bringing the VP16 activation domain along for the ride. This recruits additional DNA transcriptional machinery, leading to more protein production. Importantly, an antibiotic called tetracycline can be used to inhibit this process, which allows for the production of these GM organisms without them dying before maturity. Now, the male mosquitoes, which don't bite humans, only carry this TTAV gene, allowing them to live healthy lives and reproduce with wild females. Offspring of these couples that are female will not survive the larval stage, whereas due to traditional genetic laws, half of the male offspring will carry the TTAV gene and survive to adulthood. The other half of the males will survive and not carry the gene. Ideally, this process leads to all females in a population dying, and thus the whole population dies. It is impossible to imagine all possible outcomes of a project, but these GM mosquitoes have been designed to be as safe as possible. Females, the only sex that bite humans, die with the TTAV gene before adulthood, so there should be no interaction between GM mosquitoes and humans. In nature, it is incredibly rare for DNA to be transferred between organisms, and especially since this trait is detrimental, it is unlikely to persist in a population in a worst-case scenario. So, I believe it's actively harmful to society to pretend that we know everything about a topic, especially a topic as complex as biology and genetics. However, uninformed discussion of human challenges like this can be just as toxic. If you have an issue with GMO technology, that's good. We need skeptics in science, but it is also important to weigh the alternative of not doing anything. For example, the needless fear of a product just because it is GM cannot outweigh the consequences of 1 million people dying every year from mosquito-transmitted diseases. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I look forward to reading them. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe to DIY Biotech. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. And so STI can be achieved by sterilizing males with, SIT can be achieved by sterilizing males with radiation or genetic modifications.